They'll come into your life like a dream, charming, magnetic, irresistible. But don't be fooled by beauty or surface charm. Some women are not what they appear to be. They don't walk in with red warning signs glowing above their heads. No, their danger lies in how well they disguise manipulation as love, control as concern, and selfishness as strength. This isn't about judging women. This is about protecting your peace, your power, and your future, because not all that glitters is gold. Some of it is toxic. Here are the 8 signs of bad women. Learn them, recognize them, protect yourself. She doesn't ask for your help. She demands your sacrifice. She doesn't encourage you to rise. She convinces you that your rise is a threat to her happiness. A bad woman uses guilt the way a skilled magician uses misdirection. While you're caught up in trying to make her feel better, you don't realize you're slowly losing pieces of yourself. It's never about love. It's always about control. But she'll never call it that. She'll dress it in pretty words like care, or concern, or I just miss you. But underneath it all is a need to dominate your emotions. She makes you feel like you owe her something even when you've done nothing wrong. You take time for your work. She says you're neglecting her. You focus on your goals. She accuses you of being selfish. You set boundaries. She calls you cold. And little by little, she reprograms your thinking until you believe that loving her means abandoning yourself. You begin to choose her comfort over your own clarity, her needs over your priorities, her moods over your peace. She won't scream at you. She won't always argue, but she'll drop just enough hurt in her voice to make you feel responsible. I guess I just don't matter to you anymore. I guess your dreams are more important than me. I just thought love meant making time for each other. Sounds innocent, sounds reasonable. But that's the trick. Her guilt doesn't arrive like a storm. It seeps in like a fog, quiet, slow, and disorienting. You'll start to apologize more, even when you didn't do anything wrong. You'll start to explain yourself all the time as if you need permission to live your own life. You'll cancel plans, delay dreams, and start to feel guilty for even thinking about your own success. That's not love. That's emotional debt. And the interest rate is your identity. She'll convince you that you're being a better partner by sacrificing, when in reality, you're being conditioned to forget who you are. And every time you give in to her guilt, she gets stronger, not in love, but in control. She learns that if she cries, you'll stay. If she sulks, you'll fold. If she gets distant, you'll chase. It becomes a cycle where your efforts are never enough, and her approval becomes the prize you're constantly trying to win. But she keeps moving the goalpost. She'll say things like, I didn't ask for much, right after you've given everything. Or, you never listened to me, right after you sacrificed time, energy, and self-worth just to keep her happy. And you start to think that maybe you're the problem, that maybe if you just tried harder, she'd be satisfied. That's exactly how control works. It doesn't take your power by force. It convinces you to hand it over willingly. It's subtle, it's psychological, and it's effective. Because now you no longer ask if her demands are fair, you only ask if you're doing enough. That's how she wins. By making you forget the question you should have asked all along, is this love or am I being controlled? A bad woman doesn't need to raise her voice to break you. She just needs to make you feel like everything is your fault. That her sadness is your failure, that her mood is your responsibility, that her chaos is your job to fix. And before you know it, you're not in a relationship anymore. You're in a cage. This type of guilt is dangerous because it doesn't just affect your relationship. It bleeds into your work, your friendships, your self-confidence. You become quieter, smaller, doubtful, and you start to fear her disappointment more than you crave your own growth. You become a version of yourself that's always apologizing, always adjusting, always afraid. That's not love. That's emotional slavery disguised as romance. And the longer you stay in it, the harder it becomes to see clearly. You might tell yourself it's just a phase, that she's just sensitive, that maybe you're the one who's too focused on yourself, but deep down, you know something's off. You know that love should never feel like you're being drained. You know that support should lift you, not limit you. And you know that guilt should never be the glue holding a relationship together. Love is not about bending until you break. It's about standing tall together. And if someone makes you feel bad for simply being yourself, that's not your soulmate. That's a red flag wrapped in affection. This kind of manipulation doesn't always look toxic on the outside. To others, she may seem caring, attentive, even loving, but behind closed doors, it's a different story. It's constant emotional pressure dressed as devotion. It's love with conditions, affection with terms, and a peace that always comes with a price. It's draining, it's disorienting, and it's not your job to fix someone who uses your empathy against you. No matter what happens, she always finds a way to be the victim. Even when it's clearly her fault, she'll twist the story, bend the facts, and reshape reality until you're left questioning what actually happened. She's mastered the art of deflection. If you catch her in a lie, she'll cry and tell you how scared she was. If you confront her about her disrespect, she'll say you pushed her to that point. If she breaks your trust, she'll spin it into a sob story where somehow you are the reason she had no choice. She never owns her actions, never sincerely apologizes, never says, I was wrong. Instead, she always paints herself as the one who's hurt, misunderstood, and mistreated. Over time, this behavior chips away at your sense of truth. You start walking into arguments feeling confident and walking out feeling guilty. You begin to question whether your concerns are valid. You begin to doubt your memory, your emotions, your perspective. Because she doesn't argue to solve problems, she argues to flip the script. The moment she feels like she's losing accountability, she'll grab onto emotional manipulation and play the victim so convincingly that even you start to feel like the bad guy. She doesn't just deny blame, she rewrites the story. And if you stay long enough, you'll start starring in a narrative where she's the heroine and you're the villain. No matter how much love, effort, and patience you've shown, she may start sentences with, I just can't believe you would, or I guess I was never enough. Not to express pain, but to weaponize it. She uses sympathy as a shield, tears as a tactic, vulnerability as a mask. And behind that mask is someone who's terrified of facing herself, someone who would rather damage your reality than take responsibility for her own actions. Because to admit fault, even a little, would mean admitting that she isn't perfect. And her ego won't allow that. So instead of reflecting, she projects. Instead of changing, she blames. She might even go to others and tell a completely different version of events, one that protects her image while painting you as cruel, distant, or toxic. The most dangerous part? She doesn't even have to be loud to play the victim. She might do it subtly, quietly, with a sigh, with a long silence, with just enough pain in her eyes to make you feel like a monster. And when you try to reason with her, she'll say, I can't talk about this anymore, it's too painful. Or, you're always making me feel like I'm the problem. And there it is again. Now, you're the aggressor. She takes your need for clarity and turns it into an attack. She frames your accountability as cruelty. And slowly you learn to stop bringing things up. You learn to avoid conflict. You begin to tell yourself it's not worth it because every conversation becomes a one-sided courtroom where the verdict is already decided. She's innocent and you're guilty. You'll find yourself stuck in a pattern where nothing gets resolved. You apologize just to keep the peace. You hold back just to avoid the drama. And all the while, resentment builds inside you, but she doesn't notice. Or worse, she does notice and doesn't care. Because for her, the goal was never to resolve things. It was to avoid responsibility and maintain control. She wins when you give up on having your truth heard. She wins when you let things slide. She wins when you start thinking that maybe she's the one who's fragile and you're just too harsh. But here's what's really happening. You're being emotionally gaslit. It's exhausting to love someone who plays the victim. Because no matter how much grace you extend, how much you try to communicate, how much you soften your tone, it's never enough. There's always something else you did wrong, always another reason why she can't trust you, can't forgive you, can't open up. But when you really look at it, you start to see the pattern. Her past relationships ended the same way. It was always someone else who broke her, someone else who didn't understand her, someone else who mistreated her. The details change, but the story stays the same. And now you're just the latest chapter. What she won't admit is that she thrives on this narrative because it gives her power. Being the victim means she never has to evolve, never has to apologize, never has to do the work of healing. Instead, she collects pity, builds a support system of people who only hear her side, and leaves a trail of emotionally confused partners who don't understand how something that started with love ended with blame. And that's the real tragedy, because her refusal to take responsibility doesn't just hurt you, it keeps her stuck too. She'll never grow, never become better, never experience real love, because she's too busy avoiding her own reflection. But in the moment when you're the one being blamed, manipulated, and guilted, it doesn't feel like she's avoiding growth. It feels like you're constantly under fire for crimes you didn't commit. It feels like no matter how much you explain, you're unheard. No matter how much you give, it's unappreciated. No matter how hard you try to fix things, it all breaks again because she refuses to look within. And it's not your job to fix someone who refuses to see their own part. You can love her deeply and still know that her refusal to take ownership is destroying everything you're trying to build. She needs attention like oxygen, but not just any attention, the kind that keeps her at the center of everything. If the spotlight isn't on her, she'll find a way to drag it back. She thrives on validation, craves admiration, and gets visibly uncomfortable when the energy in the room isn't revolving around her. It's not confidence, it's insecurity dressed in performance. At first, it might look like charm. She laughs loudly, tells captivating stories, and always seems to know how to grab a room's interest. But over time, you begin to notice that it's never just about connection. It's about control through attention. She doesn't connect with people to bond. She connects to be admired, to be desired, and to be envied. In a relationship, this becomes a ticking time bomb because no matter how much love you give, it's never enough. She needs constant reminders that she's beautiful, wanted, superior, not because she's vain, but because deep down, she's afraid of being ordinary. She uses compliments as fuel. And when that fuel runs low, she becomes distant, irritable, or starts seeking it elsewhere. Not always physically, but emotionally, mentally. Social media becomes her stage. Every post is curated for approval, every story crafted for reactions. If you don't compliment her selfie fast enough, she'll notice. If other people do and you don't, she'll hold it against you. Your love becomes a scoreboard, and she's always watching who's applauding the loudest. When she enters a room, she scans to see who's looking. When you go out together, she's more focused on how others perceive her than on being present with you. And if someone else gets attention, especially another woman, she feels threatened, not inspired. She needs to be the most attractive, the most talked about, the most adored, even if it means tearing others down subtly just to elevate herself. She might throw passive comments like, "She's pretty, but kind of fake looking." Or, "I just don't get why people like her so much." And you start to see it's not just about being seen. It's about making sure no one else is seen more than her. This need for attention becomes even more dangerous when it extends to flirting. She flirts not because she's interested in someone else, but because she wants to prove she still can get anyone she wants. She'll laugh a little too hard at someone else's jokes, stand a little too close, drop a compliment that's just personal enough to sting. And when you bring it up, she'll say, "You're being insecure," or "You're overreacting." But deep down, you know it wasn't innocent. You know it was intentional, and she knows it too. She feeds off the jealousy. It reassures her that she's still desired, still powerful, still in control. This attention-seeking behavior isn't limited to other people. It extends to crises too. If something dramatic isn't happening, she'll create it. If you're going through something and need support, she'll somehow shift the conversation back to her problems. If you're getting praise, she'll suddenly reveal a secret pain she's been holding in. It's always about recentering the narrative around her And if she feels like she's being ignored, she'll provoke a fight just to get a reaction. Because to her, attention, positive or negative, is better than being overlooked. And she's learned that chaos often brings focus. So she'll pick a fight before your big day. She'll get moody right before you have an important meeting. She'll cry when the energy is on you, just to make sure it comes back to her. You'll start to feel like you're not in a partnership, but in a performance, where you're just a supporting role in her ongoing show. You start to filter your words, not because they're wrong, but because you know anything that doesn't validate her could spark conflict. You begin to shrink, not to avoid drama, but to keep her ego intact. And the scariest part is you might start to blame yourself. You might think, maybe I should be more expressive, or maybe I'm not giving her enough attention. But the truth is, no amount of attention will ever satisfy someone who uses it to fill an emotional void. She doesn't just want to be loved, she wants to be worshipped. And if you ever stop clapping, even for a moment, she'll start looking for a new audience. Not necessarily because she doesn't love you, but because her identity is tied to how others see her. And in that world, genuine intimacy takes a backseat to public perception. What matters is how admired she looks, not how connected she truly is. She's addicted to being seen, even if it means being seen by strangers more than being known by the one who actually cares for her. This addiction to attention slowly corrodes the foundation of the relationship. It leaves no space for stillness, for trust, for depth. Because the moment things go quiet, the performance must start again. She's not comfortable with peace. She's only comfortable when there's a mirror reflecting admiration back at her. And that mirror has to be polished constantly by you, by friends, by followers, by anyone. The exhausting truth is you'll never be enough for someone who doesn't know how to be full on the inside. She has mastered the art of control, but not in ways that are obvious. She doesn't bark orders or demand your obedience outright. She manipulates with silence, suggestion, and psychological games that are designed to keep you confused, off balance, and dependent. She disguises control as care, frames dominance as looking out for you, and slowly, without you realizing it, begins to pull every string in the relationship. It starts with small things, subtle comments about your friends, passing judgment on your habits, quiet disapproval when you express an opinion that doesn't align with hers. You start adjusting, not because she asked you to, but because you want to avoid that look, that tone, that energy shift she uses to show discontent. She doesn't need to yell to control you. Her silence is louder. If you upset her, she'll withhold affection, attention, or even conversation until you come crawling back, apologizing for a crime you didn't know you committed. And in that moment, without saying a word, she's shown you exactly how the power works. You speak, she withdraws. You change, she returns. It's a reward and punishment system disguised as emotional sensitivity. You begin to feel like you're walking on eggshells, constantly managing her mood, adjusting your words, second-guessing your truth just to maintain peace. But peace isn't the goal. Obedience is. The more you accommodate her, the more she expects. The more you explain yourself, the less she listens. Because she doesn't want understanding, she wants control. When you express how you feel, she doesn't comfort or reassure you. She analyzes your words like weapons, looking for flaws, weak spots, anything she can use to spin the narrative in her favor. She remembers every mistake you've made, and she keeps those memories ready like ammunition. Not to discuss them, but to bring them up whenever she feels like you're slipping out of her grasp. She'll remind you of your failures, not to heal, but to weaken your confidence. And over time, you start to shrink. You stop expressing frustration. You stop asserting your needs. You begin to internalize the idea that everything you do must pass her approval before it's valid. She doesn't celebrate your independence, she challenges it. If you want to spend time alone or with others, she questions your loyalty. If you succeed at something, she subtly downplays it, questions the details, or finds something wrong with how you handle it. If you make a decision without her input, she takes it as a threat, not a partnership, because true autonomy scares her, not because she fears losing you, but because she fears not being in charge. Her sense of security doesn't come from love, it comes from control. She wants to be the lens through which you see your life. Every decision, every relationship, every feeling must be filtered through her preferences, her opinions. She may use guilt as a leash. If you loved me, you would. I guess I'm just not important to you. I'm always the one making sacrifices. These statements sound emotional, even vulnerable, but they are power moves. She uses your compassion against you. Your empathy becomes a weakness in her game. And slowly, without realizing it, you start living for her approval instead of your own authenticity. You edit yourself, you delay your goals, you silence your intuition, all because she's created a dynamic where disagreement feels like betrayal and individuality feels like rebellion. What makes it worse is that to the outside world, she might seem supportive, sweet, even passive. Her control is hidden behind a mask of grace. People may admire her calm demeanor, her poise, her subtle way of speaking, but behind closed doors, you see the truth. She is strategic, calculating, and always 2 steps ahead in emotional warfare. Her control isn't physical, it's psychological. She doesn't force, she conditions. She doesn't argue, she manipulates. She doesn't fight for power, she quietly assumes it, then punishes you for challenging it. This kind of control creates a prison with invisible bars. You don't even notice you're trapped until you try to do something she doesn't like. That's when the walls close in. She'll gaslight you, make you question your intentions, accuse you of being selfish, cold, or uncaring. You'll walk away from those conversations emotionally exhausted, mentally drained, and still unsure of what even happened. That's the goal. Confusion keeps you compliant. Doubt keeps you quiet. Fear of losing her approval keeps you from being your full self. You begin to live in reaction to her, not in alignment with who you truly are. You might start to feel like a different version of yourself, more timid, more reserved, less passionate. You don't laugh as loudly. You don't dream as freely. You don't move through life with the same confidence, not because she's openly cruel, but because she subtly convinced you that her way is the only way to keep the relationship working. And in trying to hold things together, you've slowly let go of your own identity. That's the power of covert control. It's not loud or obvious. It's a silent force that molds your choices, changes your behavior, and erodes your sense of self while convincing you that everything you're doing is for the sake of love. She plays the victim so convincingly that you almost forget she's the one causing the damage. No matter what happens, she finds a way to spin the story so she comes out looking like the one who's been wronged. Her pain is always louder than your truth. Her wounds, whether real or imagined, always take center stage, overshadowing anything you've gone through. It doesn't matter if she started the fight, crossed the line, or disrespected the boundary. By the end of the conversation, you'll be apologizing, comforting her, and wondering if you were the one who messed everything up. That's the power of emotional manipulation disguised as vulnerability. At first, this victimhood appears harmless. She shares stories of her past, how people have betrayed her, used her, abandoned her, and you empathize. You feel protective. You want to show her that not everyone is like those who hurt her before. But over time, you notice that the stories never end. Every ex is a villain. Every friend is secretly jealous. Every family member is against her. She's always the one being attacked, always misunderstood, always the center of some unjust drama. And while you're trying to be the hero who saves her from her past, you don't see how she's slowly training you to excuse her behavior in the present. Because once she knows she can win sympathy, she uses it as a shield. She'll lash out, then cry when you react. She'll cross a line, then bring up her trauma as justification. If you try to set a boundary, she claims you're abandoning her like everyone else. If you express frustration, she accuses you of not caring about her pain. It becomes impossible to hold her accountable because every conversation somehow loops back to her feelings, her struggles, you find yourself stuck in a loop, trying to fix things you didn't break, trying to soothe wounds you didn't cause, walking on eggshells just to avoid triggering her next emotional meltdown. This constant victim role gives her a dangerous kind of power because people are quick to comfort the one who's crying, not the one who's trying to explain. She knows that tears win arguments faster than logic, that if she can break down first, she can end the discussion on her terms. And while you're left trying to piece together what just happened, she's already rewritten the narrative in her favor. It's emotional warfare disguised as sensitivity. And the more compassion you give, the more she twists it to her advantage. Even when she's clearly in the wrong, she'll paint herself as the one who had no choice. I only said that because you made me feel insecure. I only reacted that way because I thought you were going to leave me. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just felt so attacked. These phrases might sound like emotional honesty, but they're carefully crafted to make you feel responsible for her actions. She doesn't take accountability. She deflects it. She doesn't apologize. She explains. And her explanations always point back to her being the misunderstood one, the hurt one, the one who's always trying but never appreciated. In public, she'll charm people with her story. She'll talk about how hard her life has been, how much she's been through, how she just wants peace and love but always ends up hurt. People will listen, nod, and feel for her. They won't see the private manipulation. They won't know the emotional chaos she creates behind closed doors. To them, she's a survivor. To you, she's a storm. But saying that out loud feels impossible, because if you do, you become the bad guy. That's the trap. Her victimhood gives her moral superiority even when she's the one causing harm. You start to doubt yourself. You wonder if you're too harsh, too cold, too demanding. You replay conversations in your head, trying to figure out how things spiraled so far off course. You feel guilty for wanting space. You feel selfish for needing clarity, because she's trained you to see her pain as more important than your peace. And no matter how much you give, it's never enough to make her feel safe, stable, or satisfied. The more you try to support her, the more burdened you feel, because it's not support she wants, it's submission. She doesn't want to heal. She wants control through sympathy. And when things get really tense, she'll threaten to leave, collapse into emotional breakdowns, or even hint at hurting herself, all to regain the upper hand. Not always directly, but in subtle, terrifying ways that leave you frozen with fear. You stay, not because you're in love, but because you're afraid of what might happen if you leave. And that fear becomes the chain that keeps you tethered. You're not in a relationship anymore. You're in an emotional hostage situation. And the longer it goes on, the more you lose pieces of yourself trying to carry the weight of someone else's brokenness that they have no intention of fixing. Because here's the truth. Everyone has a past. Everyone has wounds, but not everyone weaponizes them. A good woman uses her pain to grow. A bad one uses it to control. She doesn't heal, she performs. She doesn't learn, she blames. And as long as you allow her to play the victim, she'll never take responsibility. She'll never stop making you feel like the villain in a story that was never yours to begin with. She thrives on drama, not because she enjoys conflict, but because chaos gives her control. When everything is calm and stable, she feels invisible, irrelevant. So she stirs the pot, creates tension, and injects emotional chaos into otherwise peaceful moments. Her power lies in unpredictability. One moment she's sweet, the next she's cold. One day she adores you, the next she withdraws without warning. This constant emotional turbulence keeps you guessing, keeps you chasing her affection, and keeps you wrapped in a toxic cycle where you're either walking on eggshells or trying to fix something you didn't even break. She turns minor issues into emotional earthquakes. A simple disagreement becomes a full-blown argument. A harmless comment becomes a personal attack. She reads negativity where none exists and responds with disproportionate intensity. And the worst part is, by the time you've realized the conversation has spiraled, you're already on the defensive. She's mastered the art of escalation, raising her voice, playing the victim, or even accusing you of things so outrageous you lose sight of the original issue. Her goal isn't resolution, it's dominance. She doesn't want peace, she wants control through emotional confusion. She's the kind of woman who needs constant stimulation, not from joy or love, but from drama. If things go too smoothly, she'll find a way to create tension. Maybe it's bringing up past issues that were already resolved. Maybe it's creating suspicion out of thin air. Maybe it's comparing you to others just to ignite jealousy. She'll pick fights at the worst times, sabotage moments of connection, or ruin important days just to recenter the emotional spotlight back on, because deep down, she equates love with chaos. And unless there's conflict, she doesn't feel alive. Unless you're hurting, she doesn't feel powerful. She uses emotional highs and lows to create dependence. After an explosion, she might come back with tears, apologies, or an intense display of affection. This roller coaster dynamic creates a cycle of trauma bonding where you feel addicted to the relief that follows the pain. You begin to crave the good moments so much that you're willing to endure the bad just to feel loved again. She knows this. She counts on it, because if she can get you hooked on the cycle, she doesn't need to offer real intimacy, just chaos followed by crumbs of affection to keep you locked in. Her emotional outbursts often have no logic. She might accuse you of things you never did, misinterpret your silence as hostility, or assume the worst intentions behind your best efforts. And no amount of reasoning will work, because she's not looking for truth, she's looking for control through chaos. When you try to explain, she'll interrupt. When you try to de-escalate, when you try to leave, she'll block your way. Not always physically, but emotionally, using guilt, fear, or threats of abandonment to reel you back in. She doesn't want resolution. She wants to keep you emotionally off balance. Even in social settings, she finds ways to create drama. She might pick a fight before an event so you show up emotionally drained. She might flirt with someone else just to test your reaction. She might start gossip or stir tension in groups so she can later play the role of the misunderstood one. This behavior isn't random, it's deliberate. She wants to control the emotional temperature of every room she enters. If she's not the center of it, she'll break the balance until everyone's focused on her. It's not just about attention, it's about power masked as emotional intensity. When you try to set boundaries, she takes it as rejection. Any limit you place becomes fuel for a new argument. If you ask for space, she accuses you of not caring. If you ask her to calm down, she says you're trying to silence her. If you express discomfort, she says you're too sensitive. Every attempt you make to create healthy communication is flipped on its head and used against you. This keeps you stuck, unsure of what to say, how to respond, or whether your needs are even valid. And that's exactly what she wants. Confusion creates control. Over time, you start to doubt yourself. You wonder if you're the one overreacting, the one who's hard to please, the one who just can't seem to handle a strong woman. You lose confidence in your voice, your instincts, your peace, not because she directly attacked those things, but because she drowned them in so much noise that you couldn't hear yourself think anymore. And every time you tried to speak up, she turned the volume up louder, more yelling, more tears, more blame, until you either gave in or shut down. This kind of emotional chaos is toxic, not just to relationships, but to your sense of self. You begin to live in a constant state of anxiety, not knowing what version of her you're going to get. You dread coming home, fear opening up, and brace yourself for emotional landmines that could go off at any moment. You start to adjust your behavior just to keep the peace, even if it means losing your own peace in the process. You stop expressing yourself freely. You stop dreaming out loud. You stop being yourself, not because she asked you to, but because she created an environment where authenticity becomes a threat to the drama she needs to survive. She cannot stand other women, not because they've wronged her, not because they're truly a threat, but because their presence competes with her need to be the center of attention. Any woman who walks in confident, kind, or secure automatically becomes her enemy. She views female friendships as battlegrounds rather than bonds, and her go-to response to any other woman's success, beauty, or happiness is silent envy wrapped in fake compliments. She doesn't uplift other women. She silently competes with them. If she can't outshine them, she'll try to dim their light. subtly, with words disguised as jokes, backhanded praise, or whispered gossip behind their backs. She lives with a constant need to feel superior. So instead of celebrating another woman's glow up, she picks it apart. She only got that job because of who she knows. She's pretty but fake. I heard her relationship isn't even real. You see, she doesn't criticize with concern. She criticizes to cope with her own insecurity. When a woman walks in and radiates peace, confidence, or grace, she sees it as an attack on her worth. And instead of self-reflecting or growing, she tears others down to stay feeling tall. It's a sign of weakness masked in judgment. A bad woman doesn't want to stand beside other strong women. She wants them removed from the room altogether. At first, this side of her might be subtle. You'll hear her make passive-aggressive remarks, claim she just tells it like it is, or say she doesn't get along with most girls. That statement alone is a huge red flag. When a woman brags about not having female friends, it's usually not because other women are jealous. It's because she sees them as competition, not community. She doesn't understand the sacredness of sisterhood, the strength in shared vulnerability, or the beauty of having women uplift one another. She's only comfortable when she's the only one shining, the only one noticed, the only one praised. Her envy isn't always loud, but it's constant. Whether it's on social media or in real life, she watches other women closely, not with admiration, but with a sharp eye looking for flaws. She'll never double tap your win, but she'll memorize it. She won't congratulate you publicly, but she'll talk about it privately, trying to minimize it in conversations with others. When someone else is praised in her presence, her mood shifts. She might suddenly criticize herself or steer the attention back toward her accomplishments. Because in her world, someone else's glow dims her own, and she can't allow that to happen, not even for a second. She doesn't build friendships, she forms alliances. Relationships with other women, if they exist at all, are based on what they can give her, how they make her look, or how easy they are to control. The moment another woman becomes a mirror, reflecting her insecurities or forcing her to grow, she cuts them off. She surrounds herself with women who either worship her or stay beneath her. Any sign of strength, independence, or emotional maturity in another woman is met with silent resentment or outright sabotage. She can't handle being around women who make her confront her own emotional immaturity or lack of self-worth. Even in romantic relationships, her attitude toward other women seeps in. She'll accuse you of being too friendly with female coworkers, too kind to female servers, too responsive to female friends. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because she sees other women as threats, not people. Her jealousy isn't rooted in love. It's rooted in deep insecurity. And that insecurity breeds controlling behavior, passive-aggressive tests, and emotionally manipulative accusations. She'll say she just has a feeling about certain women, but that feeling is really fear. Fear that someone else might show you the peace, support, and love she refuses to give. She's the kind of woman who competes in silence, but celebrates in your face. She wants your downfall, not because you wronged her, but because your strength reminds her of everything she's not. And when life blesses you, she won't be happy for you. She'll question why it wasn't her instead. If she can't have it, she believes no one should. That kind of scarcity mindset is toxic, not just for others, but for her too, because it robs her of joy, growth, and real connection. She could build bridges with other women, but instead she chooses to burn them out of fear that someone might walk across and see the truth of who she really is underneath the mask. Her criticism of other women is often a mirror of her own inner battles. She'll call another woman insecure while masking her own. She'll accuse someone else of being fake while curating a life based on image. She'll mock someone's appearance while being deeply unhappy with her own reflection. And the sad part is she doesn't even realize it most of the time. Her hate is misdirected pain. But rather than heal it, she hides behind sarcasm, gossip, and superiority. Because healing takes courage, and it's easier to destroy than to rebuild. What makes this behavior even more dangerous is how socially accepted it can appear. Society often laughs off women tearing each other down as catty or normal girl behavior, but make no mistake, It's not normal. It's a sign of emotional immaturity, of a heart that hasn't learned to love itself fully, so it can't love anyone else sincerely. A woman who constantly competes, gossips, and degrades others isn't strong. She's scared of being overlooked, outshined, or exposed. But instead of facing those fears, she hides behind cruelty masked as confidence. And if you stay too close, that same energy begins to leak into your life, your mindset, your peace. She plays the victim in every story she tells, not because she's always innocent, but because victimhood gives her a shield against accountability. In her world, nothing is ever her fault. The lies she tells, the relationships she ruins, the bridges she burns, it's always someone else who pushed her, hurt her, misunderstood her. She's never the villain, never the cause, never the one to blame. And she's crafted her narrative so well that even when she's clearly in the wrong, she knows exactly how to spin it so that others feel sorry for her instead of seeing the truth. She'll cry at the right moment, twist facts just enough, and act fragile just long enough to avoid facing consequences. Her emotional manipulation isn't always loud. It's quiet, strategic, and deeply rehearsed. This behavior allows her to avoid growth because when you're always the victim, you don't have to change. You don't have to reflect. You don't have to take a hard look in the mirror and ask, what could I have done better? Instead, you sit in your mess and blame the world for why your life isn't working. That's exactly what she does. She points fingers instead of turning inward. She avoids uncomfortable truths by making herself the center of a tragedy where everyone else is the villain. It's a dangerous pattern, not just because it deceives others, but because it deceives her. She genuinely starts believing her own lies. And that's when victimhood becomes her identity, not just a tool, but her entire persona. You'll notice she tells the same kinds of stories repeatedly about ex-friends who betrayed her, ex-lovers who used her, jobs where she was underappreciated, families who never supported her. Everyone else is cruel, ungrateful, or toxic, but you'll rarely, if ever, hear her acknowledge her part in any of it. Even when you press for details, there are gaps. The stories sound rehearsed but hollow. They evoke emotion but never resolution. Because she's not telling them to learn or to grow, she's telling them to gain sympathy, to manipulate perception, to protect herself from the truth that maybe, just maybe, she had a role in the chaos too. When conflict arises, she defaults to victim mode instantly. You could confront her gently, even lovingly, and she'll still find a way to twist your concern into an attack. She'll cry, accuse you of being mean, say you never understood her, or even threaten to walk away, not because she's genuinely hurt, but because she wants to regain control by making you feel like the bad guy. This tactic flips the dynamic. Now you're comforting her instead of addressing the issue. Now you're apologizing when she's the one who crossed the line. It's emotional warfare disguised as sensitivity. She's also a master at using her past as a shield. She'll bring up childhood trauma, past abuse, old heartbreaks, not as a way to heal, but as a way to avoid accountability. Anytime you try to hold her to a standard, she retreats into her wounds and says, you don't know what I've been through. And while empathy is necessary, there's a difference between healing from pain and weaponizing pain. She chooses the latter. She uses her past not to inspire strength, but to excuse weakness, not to connect, but to deflect. And if you're not careful, you'll start excusing everything too, until you realize you've become her emotional punching bag, simply because you cared too much. In conversations with others, she carefully curates her narrative. She'll tell people just enough to make you look bad, but not enough to reveal her own behavior. She might say you were controlling without mentioning how she constantly pushed your buttons. She'll say you were distant without admitting how she emotionally drained you. She paints pictures where she's soft, loving, misunderstood, and you're cold, ungrateful, or cruel. This manipulation is powerful because people often believe the one who cries louder, not the one who speaks the truth, and she knows that. So she plays her role well, gaining allies and sympathy while quietly tarnishing your reputation behind the scenes. In relationships, this behavior becomes a pattern. When things go wrong, she doesn't ask, how did we get here? She says, look what you did to me. And over time, this mentality erodes trust, communication, and intimacy. You feel like you're constantly walking into emotional traps where any disagreement becomes a reason for her to break down, retreat, or lash out. You stop bringing up concerns because you know they'll only be met with guilt trips or tears. You stop asking for what you need because somehow your needs always become an attack against her. This emotional imbalance poisons even the strongest bonds because love can't grow where truth isn't allowed. And worst of all, she teaches others to view life through a lens of blame. She models emotional immaturity, showing that the way to deal with pain is to deflect it, the way to avoid responsibility is to play the helpless one, and the way to keep people around is to guilt them into staying. It's a cycle that damages not just her relationships, but her own future. Because victimhood might gain short-term sympathy, but it guarantees long-term loneliness. People eventually see through the act. They get tired of the manipulation, the lack of accountability, the never-ending sob stories, and when they leave, she adds them to her collection of villains, never realizing she's the common denominator in every broken connection. But as long as she continues to cling to that victim narrative, she won't heal, because healing requires ownership. It requires the courage to say, yes, I was hurt, but I also hurt others. Yes, I went through pain, but I don't want to stay broken. Until she reaches that point, she will continue to live in the cycle of blame, playing the same role in different relationships, telling the same stories with new names, never truly moving forward. What makes bad women dangerous isn't how they look. It's how well they hide. It's how charming they are when they want something, how convincing they sound when they cry, how real their stories feel, even when they're fake. But once you know the signs, you can't unsee them. Once you've felt the sting of betrayal, the drain of manipulation, the burn of lies, you become wiser, stronger. This is not a call to hate. This is a call to heal, to stop tolerating behavior that breaks your spirit, to walk away from relationships that feed your insecurities and starve your soul. Because you deserve more. If you've been with a bad woman, don't carry shame, carry the lesson. You trusted, you loved, you gave. That's not weakness. That's courage. Now you get to choose differently. Choose peace over chaos, substance over surface, growth over games, a partner, not a project. There are women out there who build, who heal, who love without conditions. Women who lead with grace, who lift others up, who don't need to dim your light to shine. But you'll never find them if you're still holding space for the ones who break everything they touch. Your energy is sacred, your heart is not a playground, and your future, that's royalty level. Stop handing out crowns to those who only come to take. From this moment forward, raise your standards, sharpen your vision, let go of the illusions and see people for who they are, not who you hope they'll become. The wrong woman will cost you your peace, your power, and your purpose. The right one will multiply everything good in you. Know the difference and never settle for less again.